And it's showtime from downtown Winnipeg.
Forcing the blast. Moves back. Scores! Shankly wires it. Scores!
What a stop by Hellebuck.
Kyle Connor. Jets go bang, bang, bang.
Welcome to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets.
Well, we've hit the National Hockey League's All-Star break, so what better time to dive into episode 151 of the Ground Control podcast featuring Paul Edmonds and Jamie Thomas of 680 CJOB. We're going to hear from Dave Poulin in a little bit. Jamie had a chance to chat with him a little bit earlier today as we record this, which is kind of a day before the skills competition at the NHL All-Star festivities. But guys, before we get into that, and all the all-star stuff that obviously Josh Morrissey, Connor Hellebuck heading down there to represent the Winnipeg Jets. You'll want to keep an eye on Jets socials and whatnot for all the great content coming out of that weekend. But I'm curious what you guys would classify as your favorite moment or game from the first 52 games or so that the Winnipeg Jets have played. And I'm sure the chemistry that you guys have on the radio, you guys will know exactly who's going to go first on this one. There's going to be nobody talking over anybody at any point as I throw this up in the air for both of you to have.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Exactly what I thought you were going to do.
Well, there's been, and I'm not trying to bully my way into this either.
Yeah, no.
Kind of gets need a starting point. So I'll start. I mean, there's obviously Jamie and I could probably pick out a top five if you really wanted to, but that's not what the exercise is about. It's to maybe single out one game that you really liked. I mean, there's been a number of them where they've played very well. I mean, the Tampa game at home, you think about that. But the one singular game for me that I think encapsulates exactly how you want the Winnipeg Jets to play, exactly how they have improved this year, and what you're expecting, I think, in most of the 30 games that remain, because there are going to be some nights where you just don't have it. That is obviously going to be part of it. It's 82 games. You're not going to be as fresh as a daisy every single time that you take to the ice. But the one for me was January 13th in Pittsburgh. And from that standpoint, it was flawless defensively. They did not allow a point to either Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin. They had their backup goaltender that was David Riddick that played outstanding in only his 11th game of the year. They had 40 plus shots directed at the goal for Pittsburgh, and they were convincing in the victory that was 4-1. I mean, it was awesome. The whole game, the 60 minutes was they just kind of squashed the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I think what really resonates out of that game for me the most, and the Philadelphia game can be thrown in there for this exact reason as well, because they hadn't won in Philly in 10 years, was that in the last 8 games against Pittsburgh, they were 1-6-1. I mean, this was a place where the points were really hard to come by. Never mind 2 points, but 1. And Winnipeg went in and probably had one of their best games of the year, as far as I'm concerned, for the way that it laid out over the entire 60 minutes. As I mentioned, they were very good defensively, scored enough goals, had pucks driven toward the net. They just stifled the Pittsburgh Penguins. And for me, January 13th will stand out as being the beacon of probably one of the best games they played, and the game that I think that they'll try to reach to more times than not in the final 30 games of the regular season this year.
I actually thought about the Penguins game because of all the reasons that Paul just said there, but I'll go back to like end of November. And whenever the Jets played Carolina, it is Paul Maurice called it a real grinder. They played fantastic for the majority of the game against a very good hockey team. And now Carolina's playing with the hottest teams in the NHL. They're up 3-0. And I know this is a weird game to think of, but they allow 3 goals straight out. Goaltenders pull, and Carolina keeps putting more and more pucks behind David Riddick. But the fact that they go on and win that game in overtime on Josh Morrissey's overtime winner, that's a game they lose last year. And I think the opponent speaks to how well the Jets were playing that game, and the fact they're even up 3-0 on Carolina, and the fact that they hung in there and fought off the fact they gave up a 3-0 lead to go on to win in overtime. I know they've had a lot of overtime magic this year. They're 7-1 in overtime this year, but that one stands out to me because I know there's a lot of grumbling going on in the stands. It was a home game, but the fact that they fought off blowing a 3-0 lead to win in overtime stands out to me a lot.
Yeah, and I'll just give my my quick one here. In terms of just overall performance, I think you can also look at, I believe it was a 5-1 win against the Vancouver Canucks in December. And that was kind of in the middle of the Jets have no players almost, you know what I mean? Like there was so many injuries, so many regulars out of the lineup, but guys just continued to step up. Your difference makers were your difference makers. And it just felt like all night that night, outside of the power play goal that Vancouver gets late from Bo Horvat, now a member of the New York Islanders, it just seemed like no matter what Vancouver did, there was a Jet stick or body in the way. And it seemed like that was the type of defensive play that I think Rick Bowness was looking for. And then it was just counterattack and offense from the defense. It was pretty much everything that I think the coaching staff would want. Similar, Paul, to the game that you mentioned in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. The other one for me was also late November. It was a 5-0 win over the Colorado Avalanche. That, they're missing Landeskog, but at the same time, Colorado is always a tough out. And I remember thinking after that game, like, we're a couple months into the season. So, it's not like you could say like, oh, it's super early still in the year, but you get that kind of statement win against the defending Stanley Cup champions, a team that's in your division. I just remember thinking in my head, like, there's something here. I don't know if it was like I needed that game to confirm it or whatever it may be, but it was just kind of one of those, okay, this is something here. So that was probably the ones that stood out for me. I'm the host, so I get to pick two. As we head in, like I mentioned, the All-Star break going on right now, obviously Josh Morrissey and Connor Hellebuck there for the Winnipeg Jets. I'm tasking you guys with picking our second team All-Stars, guys that maybe didn't end up in Florida, but we feel possibly could have. Obviously, there's a few guys that could probably fit into this category. Paul went first last time, so let's go with Jamie. Who makes your second team All-Star for the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mark Scheifele because a lot of eyes were on him at the start of this year. He had mentioned it's a fresh start, and the way the consistently asked anytime we did radio availabilities was about Mark Scheifele and his comments that he made at the end of last year. And I think the fresh start and Rick Bowness discussing with him, and his 200-foot game has improved immeasurably this year. He's up to 31 goals actually. I just think there's a lot to like about Mark Scheifele's game. It's a dramatic change from last year. It feels like there's a weight lifted off his shoulders. He's very engaged this year. Had some great discussions with him in the dressing room. So I think Mark Scheifele could have very easily gone to Florida in the All-Star game.
I had Mark Scheifele down as a point of reference. I do like the fact that 31 goals has him 8th overall, but I look at a little bit more on the balance side, and I think that Pierre-Luc Dubois or Kyle Connor could have gone for what they have contributed this year, and maybe more Kyle Connor because he does have a few more points than Pierre-Luc Dubois. But I will say this, in terms of Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's on pace for a career year in goals and points. He's a point per game player for the Winnipeg Jets. And I always look at leadership, and while he does not wear a letter, at those players that bring others with them. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, for me, has done that this year by the way he has played, both, I guess, figuratively and certainly in the example sort of aspect of it away from the game, in a sense that when you get a guy that's playing like a bull, others will just follow the way he plays. And then the other part of that is he drags other opposition players with him. And you've heard Rick Bowness talk about this, that there's been, not one guy trying to defend Dubois, but two. Well, that opens up ice for the other line mates that he has, because that's an odd man situation that now you're creating with a little bit of open ice. So for me, Pierre-Luc Dubois, 22 goals, 52 points, 52 games, point per game player. He could be a guy that would be selected. But I'm leaning toward Kyle Connor because of 59 points in 52 games, 24 goals. He's got, and this doesn't make anything in terms of how you're going to sway a voter for All-Star, but, he's hit some milestones this year as well, right? Like, the 400 points, 200 assists, 200 goals, all of that. But I also look at these two guys because if you're a point per game player and you're a minus player in the plus minus, you're not really helping the cause offensively. and there's still a little bit of a liability there. And both the two guys that I've singled out are a plus player, and Dubois is a +9. Kyle Connor is a +6. I know that it's a bit of an old analytical metric, but I still believe that over time, plus minus does give you a real good reach into how this player is in terms of a 200-foot game. So while I applaud Mark Scheifele in the 31 goals, and he probably could have got a nod, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois probably could have got a nod as well. But for me, it would be Kyle Connor, based on the fact that while I guess the goals are a little bit down from last year at this point, the points are still there, and he's contributed immeasurably to the Winnipeg Jets on that line with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I think that when you look at it, he's probably the guy that is on the outside looking in, that probably if there was an opportunity for a third placement of a Winnipeg Jet, he would be that guy. And let's not forget that he has 10 minutes in penalties this year as well. So he's playing a little harder and a little meaner. I like that.
Yeah, he's sitting a couple of minutes away from 100 in his NHL career, another milestone just sitting. We're right on the cusp of that, but it's hard to know when he's going to get that extra minor. And Paul, I was thinking Kyle Connor for this as well. Obviously, Mark Scheifele's got a great case to be made as well, Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I just remember, when I think he had 2 goals to the first 14 games, and he's sitting here and he's got 24 through 52. So I remember seeing a stat, very early, I think, or even late in January, where Kyle Connor's goal scoring was right up among some of the elite in the NHL for that stretch of time. From the time that he had 2 goals to the time that he had, I want to say 24, it was some crazy stat in terms of, the type of names that he's around. And, you don't have to tell anybody in Winnipeg just the kind of player or how good or how elite Kyle Connor is. And obviously earned his first NHL All-Star nod last year, and he was able to show that at the highest level. So certainly Kyle Connor was probably the one that stood out to me. But like you guys said, there's a number of guys that you can make a case for. And part of me is always going to wonder if Nick Ehlers doesn't miss a whole bunch of games where he'd be at, because certainly since he came back from his injury, he's been over a point per game player and a lot of fun to watch. Jamie, you talked to Dave Poulin. I'll let you tee this one up.
Dave Poulin, of course, of TSN Sports, done some Jets games this year. I asked him about why he's not surprised where the Jets are this year. Of course, he had Rick Bowness as a coach when he was in Boston. Why Connor Hellebuyck's elite, and he got to play with and against Dale Hawerchuk at the All-Star Game, when back in Paul and I's day, the All-Star Game used to be very competitive, and he talks about why that can't be that way, but just the type of player that Dale Hawerchuk was. And he played with him at the Rendezvous 87 when the NHL All-Stars faced off against the Soviets. So here's that conversation.
Shop where the players shop. Jets Gear and TrueNorthShop.com are your authentic team stores. Make sure to stock up on all your favorite Winnipeg Jets and Manitoba Moose merchandise today. Visit one of the 5 Jets Gear locations or shop online at TrueNorthShop.com.
Hi, this is Josh Morrissey, and you're listening to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets.
Dave, as we were recording this, we're on the cusp of another All-Star weekend. But before we get to that, we'll get to the Winnipeg Jets. And you're 65 points. They're second place in the Central Division. They're second place in the Western Conference. Did you see this coming when Rick Bowness took over as head coach in the offseason?
I think I've seen the team coming for 4 years now.
Yeah, yes.
And I had the advantage of having played for Rick Bowness, albeit very early. I played on his very first team as a head coach, which is a crazy thought. In Boston, in 92, 93. So I've known Rick a long time and watched what he did, particularly, along the way. And his strength was always defensive structure, and he could get a team to play better defensively. And if there was a missing element over the last few years, that's what you would argue it was. Now, you could say, well, what team can change out all 4 of their top defensemen within a year? And everybody gone one summer, literally, which is what happened to Winnipeg. And so it takes time. And, even to say that, 4 of the new members are acquired by a trade, what it is to trade in the NHL right now. And everybody proclaims you can't make a trade, and Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt. and Dylan DeMello came by trade, and Neil Pionk came by trade, and you've been able to do it, So it's taken time. It's arguably taken more time than I thought it was going to. And then Pierre-Luc Dubois was another variable in there, and it took him some time to settle in. And I think with Rick, what he's been able to do, Jamie, is better, I don't know what the right word is, better communicate the availability of roles within a team where you can have 2 first-line centers. And there shouldn't be, I welcome the thought of another player coming in who did what I did, because now there were 2 of us. I didn't look at it as a threat. And I think they had to work through some things there with Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois. And, so call me what you will. Who's the first line on the team? I don't know. Who's the second line?
It's hard to
tell. I don't know. But if you said to me, and I'll tell you a funny story. I got traded from Philadelphia to Boston and for Kenny Linsman, straight up. And the first presser I did in Boston, the first question I got, it was late January, was, are you okay being a third-line center? Because the guy you were traded for couldn't accept being a third-line center.
Yeah.
And my answer, Jamie, was, do I get to go on every third shift? And they just laughed. And I said, if I get to go on every third shift, isn't it up to me to determine what I am by my play? And so if you said, to the first 2 lines in Winnipeg, because there's clearly 2, in my mind, there are 2 number 1 lines. And you said, okay, I don't know which one of you is the number 1 line, but you're going to get to go on every second shift. At that point, is it up to them to determine who is what? Yeah. And maybe it was a fresh voice to do it in Rick. And I like the fact that the components of those lines have changed from time to time, because maybe with who you're playing, Cole Perfetti's better there, or maybe Nikolai Ehlers is better there, or Wheeler and Scheifele are so good together. But sometimes it's a refresher when you go in and see Wheeler's name beside Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I think the luxury of it is something that Rick had and recognized, and maybe he recognized it, Jamie, from coaching against it.
Right, and I think
and those fresh eyes.
To that point, he always, when he spoke with Josh Morrissey, and when he spoke to us about Josh Morrissey, he said when he was in Dallas, their game plan was to contain number 44. Maybe that, and saying that to Josh Morrissey, got the wheels turning a little bit more about how much of an elite player he was. So to that, are you surprised that Josh Morrissey has obliterated personal bests and assists and points already? He'll get to goals eventually, but just where the step he's taken in a short period of time in just 52 games.
I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm not surprised. I've always been a huge Josh Morrissey guy back to his draft. And, that year we ended up with 2 picks in the mid-20s. We traded up for the second one. We knew he wasn't getting to us. But Dave Morrison, our head amateur scout at the time, loved Josh Morrissey, loved him. And so I heard a lot about a player I wasn't going to get to choose in the draft. So I was always so respectful. Mo and I used to have these funny conversations, and we actually home visited a couple of kids the old college way, and I remember him, and it'll take you all the way back to Ryan Johansson, who was in Tier 2 hockey at the start of the year, and then he was on a college route, and Mo was saying, I got a young kid, and it's a centerman, and he was going to play college, and now he's going to go major, and you might have to get me up a little higher in the draft to get him. And then as the year went on, you might have to get me a little higher in the draft to get him. And then I was like, okay, I can't get you to 4th overall. It's a nice thought. But that's the way it was with Josh Morrissey as well, where, that year, that's the player you're seeing now was the player that was there in junior. And that was the profile of that player. And it took time for a lot of reasons. It took time because think of the first teams that he joined and where he was on the hierarchy of that group with Bufflin and Trouba and Sherratt and Tyler Myers. And naturally, a young kid was lower in the hierarchy. But the emergence of him, and it's fresh eyes that say, do you know how good you are? And sometimes it takes a player, and sometimes it takes the maturity and age too, Jamie, though, to say, I'm also willing to accept that role. And I thought that last game before the break is exactly what he did. He accepted the role. I know I'm leading from the exact skates I skated, not from another seat, not from another role. My skates are leading the way, and that's exactly what he did, and a huge win before the break.
I think it's so when a team underachieves, sometimes people look at the goaltender as the issue. Connor Hellebuck is now a 3-time All-Star, and constantly when I got asked through the offseason what the Jets have to do to get back to the playoffs, it begins with number 37. Is it fair or unfair that goaltenders are treated this way or are graded this way on team success? Because there's just so many other variables that go into when a team doesn't make the playoffs outside of the goaltender didn't play as well as they thought they should.
I look at it as a compliment. I think they're that important. I just do. And in terms of a true number one, I can play 65 games in the NHL right now. How many are there?
No, not many.
You might be on one hand. And if you're getting off the first hand, you're just getting to the second hand. Maybe 7.
Right.
You throw Saros in there and maybe 7, maybe 8, but that's being generous. So I think it's a compliment to Connor Hellebuck because they're that important. They really are. And it's that much of a luxury to have them because it's interesting now, the philosophy, Jamie, that, you need 2 to win and you have to have a pair. Well, the guys that saying that don't have 1. Right?
Okay.
Isn't that true?
Yeah,
right?
that clears up the whole conversation.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah,
I tend to simplify things, Jamie. I don't want to complicate this.
Right.
And,
yeah.
If I don't have something, I'm going to tell you my 2 are just as good as your 1.
Absolutely. All-Star Weekend is upon us. It's not going away. It's a corporate sponsor dream. It's what the NHL does to reward its corporate sponsors and the fans, for that matter, in the cities that they're at. So, is there any way, in your opinion, to improve All-Star Weekend outside of what they're doing right now?
I think, I don't think you're going to get a game of the caliber of some of the games that I played in.
Yes.
Again.
Yeah.
And the first one I played in was 4-3. And
wasn't it late
first
overtime?
Period, no, it was late in the game. I think it was. I don't think it went to overtime. It was late in the game. Brian Propp scored the game winner, and in the first period, Toronto was a member of the West, and their hot shot rookie Wendell Clark ran Mario Lemieux in the first period, like big hit, and it's my first All-Star game. Yeah. And I remember in the locker room at the end of the first period, Mario said something about, hey, somebody might want to run Gretzky out there. And somebody else said, yeah, not a good idea. He's got 9 teammates here.
Yeah. You look at the roster, like, was there anybody else from the Oilers they could put on there?
That's exactly right. Speaks to their Hall of Fameness.
Yes.
But it was a very different game. And I don't think you'll ever get back to that. So put that aside. I don't want to get back to where it went shortly after that when it was 23-20, 5-on-5. I don't think that. So they've tried to tweak it and they've tried to adjust it and let the creative. I would let the creative minds that understand. How am I going to put this? That understand what the next gen wants to see, and let them have it.
Right.
Let the potential fans, this isn't for the true hockey fans. When I say that, the game itself isn't for the true hockey fans. The skills are the skills. And in 86, they came in, Jamie, and Brian Trottier might have been the head of the Players Association then. And he said, yeah, they tried to get us to agree to some skills competition type of thing. And we just said, no, we're not doing that. We're just not. And, in that locker room itself, Bossy and Trottier and Larry Robinson and Ray Bork and Matt Snaslin and Peter Stastny. And it was just, awesome names.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we're not doing a skills competition. We're just not doing that. But I think if you let the creative, and I would say the creative people projecting what's ahead, let them find things way to make it a great weekend. And you are right. I've had the fortune of being at 3 of them as a player, but I was the middle one was Rendezvous, so it was a little bit different. But I've also covered them, as an analyst or a hockey guy. And I did Tampa, I did San Jose. So I've done a few of them, and they're fun.
They're fun.
And
I agree.
You are right. For the player, though, Jamie, I think there's a huge importance for the young player. Josh Morrissey going to his first one. And I can tell you, when you sit in that locker room for the first time, and I know he's experienced cool things in life, but when you sit for the first time and you look around at the nameplates and the jerseys as they hang in the locker room,
yes,
and you wander over to the coffee machine and you wander up to whomever it is, it's pretty cool. And for me at that point, it was Bossy and Trache and who I'd battled, Flyers, Islanders, and it was Peter Stastny, who I had so much respect for, and it was Larry Robinson, and you'd say, that's cool. And what are they going to take back from that? What is he going to take back from a conversation that he has? Maybe it's with someone on the other team. Maybe it's a Patrice Bergeron, or that type of player. I say Bergeron because last year it was Suzuki and Bergeron. I remember them on the ice before the skills competition. And I don't know which one went up to which one, and that doesn't matter, but just the conversation, what it was worth to me in terms of my own belief and my own self-esteem and my own, career moving forward was huge.
So let's go through, like, you 86, 87, 88. 86 was very unique because I believe that was the first year it was the vote in for the fans. And your teammate at the time, Pelle Lindbergh, was on his way to being probably a Hall of Fame goaltender, had won the Vezina Trophy, a terrible accident, lost his life. What did it mean to you and your Flyers teammates that year to have him voted in as the starting goaltender for the Wales Conference?
It may have put closure to it. That would have been the preceding. It was about 4 months later, maybe still really close. And I'm not sure you ever put closure to that because there's still days today when I think about it. But to know he would have been there with you, it was my first one. He had been before, but also what he meant to that team, up to that time, but what he meant to that team moving forward. He taught us how to win. He taught us, how to be different, how to be special. All those things came into mind with the respect he got in being voted in posthumously.
Did you have teammates on the Wales Conference come up to you guys and talk to you about Pelle at all?
Yeah, we did. You know what it was with that, Jamie, is an opportunity to talk on a different level, which you don't get with the opposition players very often. A lot of different people talked to me about that experience in all walks of life, in all sports. I had a long chat about it the following summer with Bobby Knight, who had a player paralyzed in an accident. I'm trying to remember the player's name. I think his first name was Landon. And just what the team had gone through. And, when Bobby Knight walks up to you and starts talking to you about something, you're kind of caught off guard, but he wanted to know how the team handled it, how we got through it, how we managed it, and how we moved forward from that. So that All-Star game was another step in moving forward from it, the recognition that he received, that he would have received being there.
Okay, so 86, 87, 88. You played against Hawerchuk in 86 and 88. He was your teammate at Rendezvous in 87. Just go through what playing against him in the NHL, certainly playing against him in an All-Star game, and then being his teammate in 87.
Way more fun to be his teammate, Jamie. I'll tell you that. Way more fun to play up his line.
Yeah.
I will tell, I think in Winnipeg, you're spoiled because you know how good he was. And I'm not sure. It's hard to say a Hall of Famer didn't get the recognition he deserved, because I think he did, but still the realization of how good he was, I think still can slip by some people. And, even playing against him, you only saw him once in a while, right? I'm east to west, so you didn't see him very often. And when they called us together at Rendezvous, first of all, no thoughts of making that team for me. Zero. no way I'm making a single team from the NHL, any nationality, to play in a world event during the All-Star Game. And I want to get back to that point in a second at the end of this, but so I make the team. We get up to Quebec City. There's a practice on the Monday night. And the first cool aspect, the games were going to be Wednesday and Friday night. There were all kinds of other events, huge events. So we couldn't skate in the Coliseum. So we had to, it was a snowstorm. We had to put our gear on at the Coliseum and then stick over shoulder, skates on stick, helmet, get on the bus. Now think about this.
Old school.
You're getting on the bus and you're watching Gretz and Mario and get on the bus, and traipsing through the snow and not a word of complaint. And I always thought about that when NHL players would be slightly inconvenienced by something at a practice or something. We're going to walk all the way over there. And not a second of complaint. And so they called us together, Kevin Janine and Dale and I, and they said, okay, Dave, we're going to move you to the left wing. And Kevin, you know what you're going to do in the right wing. And Dale, you'll be in the middle, and we're going to play you against the KLM line, Krutov, Larionov, and Makarov, and then Kasatonov and Fetisov, the two defensemen. And by the way, at that point, I believe they'd been together for 18 years as a line. They were put together, or 16 years as a line. They were put together when 4 of them were 12 and Larionov was 10. And so, and they said, amazing. Dave and Kevin, it's pretty clear what you're going to do. But we're kind of quizzically looking at Dale, like, why is one of the best offensive players here? And they said, because if we do get the puck, we're going to have to keep it. And the best possession player in the NHL is standing between you two guys. And fascinating look at putting together a team for 2 games. And in the first game, we not only shut down that line, we scored 2 of the 4 goals. And
you're the winner.
I can't explain how much of a factor Dale was in that game. And in the second game, I think we had another goal and we shut down that line again. That line in that tournament, we did a great job defensively against them, largely because of one of the best offensive players in the league was on our side. And when we got the puck, we just gave it to Dale.
Right. And did that change how you felt about Dale? I know he's a great player, but there's this another side to him you must have in a change.
Another level. Another level. When you have the opportunity to get to know someone, and albeit just, for a short time like that, and be a part of something special with them, it changes the way you view them. It didn't change how hard it was to play against them. I can guarantee you that. And you have to kind of eliminate that little piece of respect and say, okay, I got to go out and play against him now. I know how hard that is. And, those were such good teams in Winnipeg through that stretch.
My goodness, I could talk to you about this forever, and I always appreciate your time. Enjoy the All-Star break. You've deserved it. Looking forward to seeing you the rest of the season, Dave.
Always a pleasure, Jamie.
Hey Jets fans, I'm Sarah Orlesky. Don't forget to join me after each and every home game for the Winnipeg Jets post-game show live presented by Budweiser, where you'll get exclusive interviews, in-room access, and more. Catch us on all Winnipeg Jets platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and winnipegjets.com.
Big thanks to Dave Poulin for that and taking the time to chat with Jamie. And guys, you look at the Winnipeg Jets schedule, we got 30 games to go. It's, I know we're in the middle of a break and I'm already talking about games that are coming up and the work that has to be done yet. But the Winnipeg Jets got through the toughest 2 months, I would say, in their schedule in December and January, playing the most games of any team in the NHL during that December and January stretch. What do we expect coming out of this break after the team gets, I would say, some much needed days off?
Well, I think that February is going to be fine. It's basically a half a month, and you do have some tester games. Colorado's in there. Seattle's coming up. You'll get out of the gate with Chicago, and you hope to win that one and now have 2 wins in a row, both on the either side of the break. And then you're going to have that trip through New York, and that's always a bit of a tough one, but the travel's easy, right? So, New Jersey, they played very well. The Rangers are in the thick of things. The Islanders are hoping to get better, and they just had that big trade, as you mentioned. So that will be tough. It will be I think, arduous again for the Winnipeg Jets in the month of March, because you do have 15 games, and it will mirror what you saw a lot in December and January, where it's every second night, not a lot of consecutive days off. You're playing a lot of hockey and you're bouncing around a little bit. So I think that if you get through that, and you should be well equipped, because you're going to have this time off, everybody should be healthy. It won't be a saunter through February, but you still should be okay to have that residual from the break into March, when it does get more laborious and you are playing a more strenuous type of schedule. And then I guess you'll look at the final days of the regular season and the last 6 games in April. And, you know, if the juices aren't flowing at that point, because if you've had a decent February, a good March, now you're probably talking about where the Jets are situated right now. Are you finishing first? Are you finishing second in your division? I mean, you know, those kinds of things, when it comes to playoff seeding and home ice, become important. So all throughout this remainder of the 30 games, we're going to see stages of where the Winnipeg Jets are going to try to get to. But it will be no less important. In fact, it will be more important the final, I guess, 2 months of the regular season, because half of February, half of April, and then you have all of March. But I think there's some really intriguing games and blocks of games to take note of. And I do think that none bigger than the entire month of March. That's going to be pretty tough on the Winnipeg Jets, but they've been through it before. And I think the best thing to understand about where you're going is drawing on the experience of the past.
And of course, in there, the NHL trade deadline, March 3rd, Jets will be in Edmonton on that day. So, I mean, what direction, where is this going? Who's not going to be here? Who's coming into the Winnipeg Jets roster? So with Paul, the schedule gets a little crazy. There's some big tester games in there, but I think a lot of lessons were learned towards the games coming up to the break, about not every night. The games are going to be easy now, because, as Brendan Dillon said, teams are playing for first place. Teams are playing for their playoff lives. So it's only going to get more challenging as this goes along. But I think this rest came at a perfect time. Guys will come out of this ready to go. And it's going to be a lot of fun over the next couple of months here. So it's buckle up, everybody.
Completely agree. And you mentioned February. It's, as the Winnipeg Jets put out the press release yesterday, the Jets are going to be supporting Black History Month. Ray Neufeld played 249 games for the Winnipeg Jets between 1985 and 1989, racking up 127 points along the way. He's also participating in a special puck drop on February 28th as the Jets honor Black History Month with the official Black History game against the Los Angeles Kings. Now, Neufeld, obviously a product of Manitoba himself, has stayed around the game, whether it's through Jets alumni and friends appearances or the NHL's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. But man, is he ever fun to be around. I think about him working the room at the draft party last year, and his big laugh kind of filling the whatever conversation he was in. I remember shaking his hand, and like, I'm 6'4". I like to think I'm not a small human, but his hand basically enveloped mine, and I've never felt smaller in my life at that point. Just wondering if either of you guys have any Ray Neufeld stories.
I'll start, Paul, because I know you grew up here and you know a little bit more about Ray as well. But the short time I've been with this organization, and as I've covered this game, it's amazing to me how nice and tough guys are. And I know Ray wasn't specifically a tough guy, but just how nice and grateful they are when you talk. Not so much grateful, but just they love the game. They love being a part of the game. And Ray's been no different. So we had him on the podcast. It's great stories. It is not some of the things he had to go through were not enjoyable, but the fact that he came out of it being the guy that he is says a lot about Ray Neufeld. So I have all kinds of time for Ray Neufeld and love being around the guy. And him and Jordy Douglas were the life of the party at the draft party. So I would like to say that the three of us were, but Ray and Jordy took that took that title away from us.
Well, I've known Ray for a long time. And of course, being a Jet fan growing up, I remember the trade with Hartford and Dave Babbage and all of that. And it was tough for Ray to come home. And I think that you can make that application for players that maybe kind of don't want to come back to where they grew up and where they were reared in their hockey careers or any other sport for that matter, for reasons that if you don't perform, of course, you're going to hear it. But yeah. Ray has, I just think, been able to kind of shrug off a lot of that. I mean, he's had to battle all of his life. And what I've liked about Ray is, as Jamie mentioned, and even you, Mitch, the commitment to the alumni. Mm-hmm. And he's been there from day one. no, he's also involved himself in amateur hockey. I know he was a coach for the Arborg Ice Dogs in Junior B ranks, and driving from Winnipeg to Arborg, that's an hour and a half every day, and it's 3 hours return. Mm-hmm. He also did a lot of analytical work on the radio broadcast with the Selkirk Steelers for a number of years. So, he's been involved, and he's always tried to stay involved. And any time that you need a guy to play golf and represent the Jets or the National Hockey League, he's there. But probably the best story, and this involves Jordy Douglas as well, so I'm glad that JT brought it up. But they are very good friends, right? They are real tight. They're thick as thieves, those two guys, and they're a lot of fun to be around when they do get together. But Jordy has this thing about going up to people and introducing himself as Ray Neufeld. and Ray just rolls his eyes. He just goes with it all the time, right? Like Jordy comes up, "Hi, I'm Ray Neufeld," and he does it all the time. And I don't know how many times I've seen it, but it makes me laugh every single time that he does it. And I think it makes Ray laugh every single time that Jordy does it. And that just tells you a little bit about the charisma and certainly the great nature that Ray Neufeld is, and what a pleasure he is to be around. And I can't wait to see him the next time, because we always share a great story and a good laugh.
For sure. Looking forward to that. That game, once again, February 28th. You want more information on that, head to winnipegjets.com. That game obviously coming later in February. When the Jets do return to action on February 11th, they'll be taking on the Chicago Blackhawks, and that'll be South Asian Heritage Night. All the info for that game also on the Winnipeg Jets website. And coming up on the site in a few days is a feature I did with Harner Ryan Singh, who will be in Winnipeg that night, taking part in a bunch of initiatives around the game as well. So to close out this episode of the podcast, here's a piece of my conversation with him and his excitement for that night.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mitchell. I think as a sport, we're at this point in time where the sport of hockey, even in this country of Canada, we need to be doing more as a sport to grow the sport, right? And so I think these types of initiatives where we as a sport are going to other communities and opening our doors and welcoming them to come in, as opposed to just waiting for new audiences to come in. I think this is very important. And what it does is it increases the comfort level within the game, within an arena, what you feel about an organization. I also think it gives a sense of belonging. And when I was a young hockey fan growing up in Southern Alberta, even though I loved the game and I was so passionate about it, when I went to NHL hockey rinks or wherever, even, within the world of hockey, I didn't always feel a sense of belonging. I didn't feel welcome. And I think if, when I was growing up and we had some of these theme nights, it would have totally changed how comfortable I was. It took me a long time, even now as a broadcaster, first as a fan, to become comfortable in my own skin as a fan of hockey, and then as a broadcaster to be comfortable in my own skin in the hockey broadcasting world. And the reason being is, I've experienced racism and discrimination in hockey rinks. I've been to NHL games as a fan where I've been called all sorts of names, and I've had stuff thrown at me and my friends or my family who went to games. And so this is a very small gesture that a team in the hockey world can do, having a theme night where there's some music or food involved that incorporates a different community. I mean, it's all in good fun, and we're all coming together, because of the passion of the sport. So I think these initiatives are very important.
This has been Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. For more Jets news, videos, and more, head to winnipegjets.com.